I would like to just welcome everybody for joining. Thank you so much for taking time today. I think you're going to leave this webinar with much more knowledge than you had coming into it. It's a great presentation. My name is Tara Osborne, and I work at the home office for CMIT Solutions. I head up marketing at our home office. And I want to introduce to you Linda Cooper-Smith, who's going to be giving you this great presentation. Linda has been an owner with CMIT for over 15 years. She's had a lifetime of being an IT translator and advisor. She lives in Stamford, Connecticut. She's an expert in working remotely. Her team, since she's been an owner with CMIT, has always, prior to COVID, done a blend of working remotely, working on site with clients, and then also balancing that with working in an office. So she has great expertise on the very thing that many of us are facing now that haven't been facing prior to the pandemic. Security has been a topic that Linda has been speaking on for years. She gives regular presentations on the ever-changing landscape of cyber threats. And so I'm going to turn this over to Linda to get started. And before I do, I just want to remind everybody, there's a Q&A tab that you'll see. Please, along the presentation, if something comes up that you have a question on, just type it in then, and Linda will pause during or at the end of the presentation to try to address all those questions. So we just encourage you to use that. We prefer that over chat, just because we can address one at a time in a little bit more organized fashions. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Linda.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tara. And as I was saying during the intro, I'm jealous of the fact that you're in a sleeveless shirt. So waiting for that warm weather to be able to come out in Connecticut. So yes, I'm working from home too, as I imagine most of the people that are joining us this morning are. I've got in back of me one of our CMIT towels from one of our Miami things to be able to get me in that spirit of just being comfortable at home. So this has been, you know, as everybody says, this unprecedented event. And I think all of us would agree that life is probably not going to be exactly the same as it was before, you know, we had this pandemic. So what I want to be able to do is use this time as best we can. We've got, you know, probably about 45 minutes of content. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to security, and home security becomes something also that we now need to be able to really take into consideration. We had this huge shift of people being able to, you know, from going in the office to being now working at home. There's a lot of considerations to this. You know, in a business environment, you've got, you know, an IT company or an IT pro that is there providing all these different layers of security. And all of a sudden, you know, you start working from home, and you really need to be able to consider the security that's going on there. You know, you may not care so much as long as you can surf and be able to get onto your Netflix at the house. That's all you really need from your home environment. But a business environment, and you're dealing with intellectual property, you're dealing with private information, is much more critical to be able to really fortify. So during this 45 minutes, I don't have the time to be able to talk about all the different security layers. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover 4 of the major 12. And then if you've got the hang of those 4, and I encourage you to be able to then stay until the end so that we can tell you the rest of the 12 and how to be able to really, you know, make sure that you're doing everything that you possibly can. So what I'm also not going to go into is a whole lot of statistics about what the threat landscape is like right now. And that's our fancy term for, you know, the plague that runs around in the internet, you know, that I often talk about. I'm not going to go into and tell you that there's a hacker attack every 39 seconds at this point, or that 43% of cyber attacks are targeting small business. That's almost half of what's going on there. or that a bill that I had to be able to give to 3 different business owners in the last 90 days was a minimum of $15,000 in order for us to be able to get their environment back up because they had left themselves open to being able to catch some ransomware. So those are just some of the things that we really need to be able to worry about. So at the end of this, I'm going to make sure that you've got those 4, and I'm really tailoring this webinar to people that are not IT pros. So we talk a lot, Tara and I and the rest of the people in CMIT, with a lot of alphabet soup. So I'm going to do my best to minimize that alphabet soup or to explain it to you so that you understand the words and, most importantly, the concepts. So what I'd like to do next is I want to be able to use this opportunity to also get some firsthand research. That's another thing that CMIT does. So I want to know from each one of you how it is that you're working from home. So we're going to be doing an interactive poll this morning. So I want you to be able to listen to the 4 choices that are coming up here, and then Tara's going to put up a poll, and we're going to be able to grab some firsthand research as to how people in the small business environment are managing all of this. So the first thing that's going to be going on, the first option is I've got everything in the cloud, so I don't have to worry about security. You know, I've moved my files into 365 or SharePoint or some type of an Ignite solution, all different cloud sharing type things. My websites or my systems that I use are all in the cloud, so hey, I'm safe, and that's all that should be going on. The second option, the second way that people have done this is that they've taken a computer from their employer, from their work environment, and they're using a VPN to be able to connect back into that business network, and they're using a VPN to be able to connect to the web-based systems like a Salesforce, like a QuickBooks Online, in order to be able to look at that, be able to interact. And that home computer is on a separate network from my home devices, so it's running on a separate segment from my Alexa, my kids, you know, everybody that's visiting my home. You know, and that computer is also continues to be managed by an IT company or an IT pro. So that's number 2. The next variant that we've seen is some employers are simply not able to have a separate machine that they can bring into their employees' houses, or they didn't think that they could just kind of maybe unplug it and bring it at home while the employees are doing this work at home bit. So they're using their home machine, and they may be using LogMeIn to be able to remote onto their work machine in order to be able to do that. So LogMeIn, go to my PC, go to Assist TeamViewer, lots of different ways of being able to just go from my home computer and remoting onto that work computer and being able to do my work that way. So that's option 3. And the last variant on this is I'm just using my personal computer and I'm logging into all of my work activities straight from there. So I'm just doing what I need to be doing. I'm getting email on my home computer. I'm, you know, attending Zoom meetings. I'm accessing and uploading files. And so I'm doing that all from, you know, the home environment. So which one are you doing?
The winner is number 4.
So the winner is number 4. So you're using your personal computer to be able to do work activities. Well, let's talk about what are some things that you need to be, you know, concerned about in regards to that. So here's the real best option is option 2. And that's the option where you've taken a computer that's managed, is secure, it's got all of the stupid bloatware and games that are removed from it, it's been made that, and it's now being continued to be managed by an IT pro. And that's one of the most important things, as you'll see, is that a piece of equipment in your home, it needs to be managed. And we're going to talk about what it means to manage that piece of equipment and manage your home environment. But before going on to that, let's talk about kind of what are some of the real risks with each one of the other options. Everything I have is in the cloud. I hear this all the time from people. Who ever said the cloud was safe? That just doesn't happen. It's not safe. As you'll see, there's all kinds of plague that is going on there. So what can happen? So you may have some kind of malicious code, a virus, corrupted information that you now upload to that cloud environment. Your home computer can be infected with one of the most scariest pieces of malware that there is, something called a keylogger. And that does exactly what it sounds like it does. It stores every single key that you're typing on your keyboard, which is your username and password. And then that wonderful piece of malicious code is shooting your username and password out to some hacker or actually some queue, and the queue then picks it up and starts being able to test all of your other accounts. All of your information these days is highly aggregated in the dark web. And the dark web is dark because you go there only with an IP address, and it really is black screen and, and white, and that's all there is to it. But within there are highly correlated databases where each data breach that has occurred has added more information to that. And so they're able to tie you together by your email addresses, by your social security number, by your phone number, by your mailing address. And they build these databases so that they know an awful lot about you. And then as we have breaches with usernames and passwords, boom, that username and password goes right into that database as well. So the cloud is not safe, and it's when you get to a particular area, that's where you need to really be working and thinking about it. So you still have to be able to worry about security, even if you're in the cloud. The third option was using your home machine and log me in order to be able to remote onto your computer. This is almost completely good. And we see a lot of people being able to do this. One of the things we did for a lot of our clients was we started managing that home machine, or at least being able to do some of the fundamentals. Because the risk here is that LogMeIn and a lot of these kinds of programs allow you to be able to move a file from your home machine to now your work machine. So you may be taking a file that's infected and moving it right into that work environment where it's now going to start growing like cancer. One of the statistics we've seen about ransomware is that it will sit there, crawling around your environment for up to 120 days. And then in 4 to 5 seconds, it detonates, and wham, it goes across everything. So that's the risk with being able to use a home unmanaged machine and a remote access tool like LogMeIn. That would also be the same thing if you decided to be able to VPN from that home, that unmanaged machine, that unmanaged network, and being able to go into there. So the fourth option is using your personal computer, which a lot of you are doing, and that is just a fact of life about what is going on right now. Not the best solution, but oftentimes it is the only one that is open to a small business. So let's talk about how it is and what you need to be able to do to be able to secure that. So a little bit about us. CMIT Solutions is a national IT services company. I own and operate Stamford, Connecticut, and I'm also operating Hartford, Connecticut. But there's 200 of us all around the country, and we really act and our teams act as IT advisors, because every small business deserves not only an accountant, a lawyer, those other professionals, but you also need an IT pro in your back pocket and managing your environment to be able to keep up with this. The space of change is just so fast, both on the security side as well as certainly in terms of productivity and change that is going on. So, and we spend a lot of time being able to talk with our small business owners. We're focused solely on small business because the technology stack, as we call it, is really different. You know, for that a Fortune 500 company does to be able to manage IT. So we're all about being able to, you know, make sure that small business can do that. As Tara mentioned, I've been doing IT, you know, all of my life. I'm now doing CMIT for 15 years. I do speak regularly, and especially now on security, where before I may have been talking about 365 and email and solutions and things like that. But I'm always trying to be able to provide that education because, and this goes for really all CMIT, you know, advisors, is we don't want to be having to create a bill and getting involved with you when it was something that really was preventable. So that's one of the big things that's we're constantly looking at, or what are the things people need to know about. So let's start breaking down your home environment. Security at home, both for work but also for your personal work, is very important. Probably has some usernames and passwords, social security numbers, financial accounts. It can have your pictures. Gosh, one of my daughters ended up getting somebody stole her Facebook identity because of information that was on her computer, opened up gotten into her Facebook account, changed the picture, completely, you know, changed what it was all about. And these are the things that can happen if somebody has access to your pictures. So there's all kinds of different risks that can happen. So one of the major things we need to be able to patches and bugs and, you know, new operating system versions. Why does this happen? At the end of the day, kind of moving from left to right on this slide, computer code is what makes all of this happen. And I started my career doing software development and then managing people. Computer code is written by people, by humans. Humans are a flawed being, let's face it. We can't figure it all out right the first time. It usually takes, at least in computer world, 3 times to get everything done completely right. And then in these days, if you're a computer programmer, you're having to interact with up to 150 different other programs that are running on there. So mistakes are going to happen. Things are not going to be understood. Those bugs, mistakes, in the back door end up being exploited by the people that just want to be able to do this. And for them, this is not just people who have nothing better to do. This is now computer crime. I mean, computer crime is estimated to be at $4 trillion by the end of this year. That is more money than the estimated amounts that the drug cartels are making. So this is all about being able to make money. So, but everybody's everybody is really on top of, we don't want bugs, we don't want stupid things showing up on our screen, we don't want unsecure environments. So everybody that's in the software and in the environments is finding those bugs and being able to fix it. But unless you run the update, you're not going to get that fix. And the update is not just Office, so it's not just Windows, it's not just Apple, and yes, those Mac machines have bugs just like everybody else, and they catch viruses just like everybody else. But it's about your Java, your Adobe, your Office products, all of those other things. And this is one of the reasons, too, we rip off all of the programs that you really don't need on your program. So that solitaire game all of a sudden can end up with a security vulnerability. And are you running updates on solitaire? No, but there's running in the background, and all of a sudden it's going to mess up your computer. So everything needs to be updated. I always go back to this keylogger thing. If you don't have those updates run, that kind of malicious code is going to get in, or ransomware, and be able to start stealing your information, or just leaving you with a completely encrypted hard drive, being able to say, sorry, you got to pay me $150,000 in Bitcoin in order to be able to get your hard drive back. So we just don't want to be able to do that. So you need to also think about those usernames and passwords. And we're now going to go into, another critical item, which is password hygiene. Think of each one of those usernames as something physical, your house. Your house has a front door, it has a back door, but there's some way of getting into the house. You use a key, you use a passcode, you do something in order to be able to secure your house. You may have surveillance cameras. But not all houses are the same. You probably don't have as much security on a vacation home as you do on the home that you're occupying all the time. Why? Because there may not be as much valuable stuff on there. So no, you're not going to go, you may have just, a front door key. Oh, there's not a lot of, bad people in my neighborhood there. So you're going to, do a little bit less. And then you even have a tractor shed in the back. You may not even lock that. And these are all like some of your accounts. So, the one for your bank is going to be like your home. But the tool shed is kind of like that Gmail account you use for spam, so that every time you sign up for something, it goes there. So there's different degrees that we look at for this. And then if you think of all those accounts that you have, and say for each one it's a house, you're really a real estate mogul and you don't even know it. But that's how many you have. I mean, there's just literally 100, 200, 300, even more accounts and passwords that people have. So we need to start really concentrating, because you don't want it to get into some of those most secure, most vulnerable, most confidential areas of your home, of your information. You want to make sure that those things are really protected. So, number one, in order to protect all of this, you need a strong password. What does strong these days mean? It's a minimum of 8 characters, preferably 12 or longer. That's a combination of words, or letters, numbers, and symbols. One of the easiest tricks that I've been using here is to be able to take 3 different words and string them together. Or 3 different, so I just recently tested spring, all lowercase, 2020, star, and a wonderful program that says how secure is my password told me that it was going to take 3 trillion years for a computer to be able to hack through that password. So that's what we're talking about. And so I do have that website, and I'm happy to share that with people. But literally, if you bring up a Google search engine, type, how safe is my password, you're going to get to this wonderful location from a company called Dasher that you can start testing your passwords. So we also need to store them in a safe place. As I've talked about, you have those keyloggers, those other things going on. Where is safe? So now what we have is the need for password vaults. So there are great tools out there by Dashlane, by LastPass. The keychain on your Mac is a good and secure place. Why? Because you need to be able to get into them with an ID and a passcode, and then they're all encrypted. They're encrypted while they're running around the internet. They're encrypted when they're sitting on your cell phone. They're encrypted when you're on your desktop. And that's really the best way to be able to do that. And that vault of passwords needs to have one strong password, but now you just have to remember one, and now you're allowing yourself in there to be able to retrieve the rest of them. Honestly, if that's not something that you feel that you could ever be able to conquer because you're that kind of not comfortable with technology, take out a piece of paper and write the passwords down on there. the passwords also have to be different in each place, because remember, there are data breaches, password breaches happening every day. If you use the same password across all of your different accounts, all it takes is one breach. It now goes into some script kiddie and a queue, and they're going to start being able to test that on all of the information that they have about you and be able to systematically get into your information. Because of those data breaches, you're going to need to be able to change those important passwords on a regular basis. Every 30 days for stuff that is highly sensitive, or at any time that you may have been working on a different machine or you have some concerns. 90 days for any of your, other important accounts. And I would say that all passwords should be changed on an annual basis, even those ones for the email account that you just send email letters to and stuff. We have the ability these days to be able to run a dark web scan on somebody's email address, on a company's domain. And that starts to be able to tell us how much information and what is the most easily accessible information in the dark web. These days, with a couple $100, you can put yourself into the cybercrime business. I think the last time I looked, the going rate for 3,000 Social Security numbers was about $250, and somebody can do a lot of damage with that. So those important passwords need to be changed on a very frequent basis. Multi-factor authentication. This first came out with our banks, where the banks would say, okay, in order to be, after you type in your username and password, you now have to be able, I'm going to send you a text. It's going to get you're going to get a code. You've got to enter that code in order to be able to go in. That's multi-factor authentication. Google now has it on Gmail accounts. Microsoft has it on everything that they have. Every place where you see this as an option to logging on, turn it on, tie it together with a phone. Many of the password vaults also have a backup facility so that if you lose your phone, you also have a way of being able to do that, and being able to make sure that you've got an alternate email address for retrieval purposes. So just like in today, we have to be able to pass hygiene by wearing a mask and washing our hands on a constant basis. I would encourage you at the same time to be able to think about your passwords in the same way. Password hygiene is absolutely critical, and I would say if there's one thing that you do, if you put into practice better password hygiene, you're going to be dodging quite a few bullets that are coming out at you. So the next concept I want to be able to talk about is one of those alphabet soup things. So it's called DNS. What DNS is it stands for Domain Name Server, or Services. I always kind of honestly forget. And what it is it's the translation between a domain name and an IP address. An IP address is an address on the World Wide Web that identifies a particular server. So when you go into your browser and you type in google.com, behind the scenes there is a list that everybody has replicated if you're attached to the internet, and it says that Google lives at 8.8.8.8. And that means that traffic runs out to that data center, because remember, the cloud is also not just one cloud. It's lots of little clouds. There's a Google cloud, an Apple cloud, a Microsoft cloud, and each one of those clouds you need a username and a password to get to. But first you have to know where the address is. And essentially that's what that IP address is. Where in the world in the web is this web server sitting? So that's a really important list. And as I said, when you go into your registrar, when you go to be able to go to GoDaddy or Network Solutions, you get a domain. That domain is sitting somewhere, and that becomes that IP address. Now, what happens, unfortunately, is that a piece of code can pretty easily get into the copy that is on your computer or on your internet provider's computer, and they will now go ahead and make a change. So when you're typing google.com, you're not going to 8.8.8.8. You're going to someplace out in Russia, or North Korea, or someplace else. It may look exactly like Google's splash page because they've copied it so cleverly, but it's not. And now it says, oh, type in your ID and password. And you very innocently go in, type in your ID and password, and wham, now they've got another password. So DNS filtering, DNS checking is becoming a very critical part of home work-based security, but it also can be is needed in the home. Most home-based antivirus has this maybe as an option. So remember, the task here is that you don't want to think about whether or not you're going to a good website or a bad website. You need to start implementing a DNS service that's going to do that for you. One of the popular ones that's out there that we use for all of our small businesses is something called the Cisco umbrella. WebRoot also has this, is WebRoot DNS filtering. There are a lot of companies, it's usually a very nominal, and I mean like pennies a day kind of nominal, to be able to add this service and be able to get it going. But what happens in these cases is your computer that is set up with this now goes to a real authenticated service to do that DNS lookup, that translation of domain and IP address. And so in Umbrella's case, it's Cisco. In WebRoot, it's WebRoot. And they then take the responsibility of being able to route your traffic to the internet. But it goes one step further. They're also filtering traffic. They're making sure that the website that you've asked to go to is really a good website and not a bad website. So they do that by a reputation score that's on every website. In order for you to be able to have a web server that has a gold star, you have to jump through quite a bit of hoops. You've got to get your little certificate. You have to be around for a while. You must not have changed your IP address. If any of those, start to be able to flag, these services stop you from going. And that's when you request it, as well as your computer innocently requesting it in the background, because that piece of malicious code all of a sudden wants to ship your username and password out to Russia. So that's a really important aspect to be able to look up for. And if you just type in DNS filters, DNS services, you're going to see a number of them out there. For CMIT clients, we have now been able to extend that to all home computers at no cost for a period of time. So your computer needs to be going through a DNS filter so that you're only going to good websites, not bad websites. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through, the logical flow of how the internet works. So the World Wide Web, and I do mean wild, is a set of networks. At the end of the day, it's physical lines that are running through the ground. They're running in your street. They're running on telephone poles. They're going into these big data centers, and all of those data centers are connected. If you know anything about the history of the internet actually started by the universities wanting to be able to communicate with one another. So they each had a phone number at that time that they called one another through electronic modems. If you watch some of those old movies, you'll get on there. This is how we started ending up with that World Wide Web. So you have all of these connected, computers, and it's all happening on a global basis. But how do we do that last mile? How do you get from that Microsoft data center or that Google data center to your home? Your home is what we call the last mile. And so you've got a provider like maybe a Cox Cable or a Comcast or a Spectrum or an Xfinity or an AT&T. You've got somebody that's probably giving you television service, cable service, or some kind of DSL service, and they're bringing those communication services into you. They're bringing voice, they're bringing data, they're bringing that important internet, and a lot of times they're also the ones that are bringing in your telephone signal. So they've got a line on the telephone pole outside of your house, or if you're lucky, that line is buried in the ground so that a tree can't knock it down, and you end up out of service. And then the line crawls into your apartment, and it now comes into a modem. And so the internet provider gives you a modem. because that's the thing that communicates with their physical wires and gets you onto their network, and that's their way now of being able to provide you service, and you pay them on a monthly basis. Very often, the piece of equipment that the internet provider puts into your home also has a Wi-Fi piece to it. If it doesn't, then you go out and you buy another Wi-Fi unit. A lot of people will just go to Staples and Best Buy and be able to buy something, and poof, now you have Wi-Fi. That's a whole other chapter of why you don't have Wi-Fi all over your house, but you'll at least have good Wi-Fi in the overall area that you have that Wi-Fi service. You then very happily start connecting all of the different things in your home to that Wi-Fi. Your computer, your laptop, your kids, your printer, the Alexa, the Nest thermometer, the Sonos equipment, and everything else that goes on there. So in that way, through that Wi-Fi and through that router, all of you are able to get out and be able to interact with things that are on the web. Now, as we did a work from home, that meant that some kind of a machine was also being plopped into that home network, and is now, because it needed to be able to go out to the internet and do those. And that home, that business or work-based computer is now interacting with the rest of the stuff that's in the home. The kids may grab your computer and do something, go to some place, and all of a sudden the virus on somebody's piece of equipment. I think all of you have also heard that we've seen a lot of pieces of equipment be hacked, like people hacking into a camera, either part of a nanny cam or a camera, or even that laptop. So there's a lot of different things going on there. So what do you do about it? So these things you don't have control over. There's no way that you have control of the security in the World Wide Web. So you're going to depend on providers and services like DNS to be able to make sure that your traffic is only going to good sites and not bad sites. And now let's talk about that last mile. What confidence level do you really have that your internet provider, who you probably think you're paying way too much money to, is got security as their highest concern? The answer is they really don't. They're in the business for making money. They will, we have habitually seen, that last mile carrier, that network is very easy to be able to get into. And now once people are in that last mile carrier's network, they start knocking on your door trying to figure out what the ID and the password is. Well, the ID and password to that piece of equipment, if it's being managed by the internet provider and it's owned by them, they have it. Do you think that they spend a whole lot of time with security on the ID and password to get in there? No. Do they update it on a regular basis? Very often not. So one of the immediate things that you can do to be able to better secure your home is call your last mile and simply say to them, could you check my router and my modem, and could you just tell me if it's running the latest, all of the updates and the latest firmware, and that it's not too old? That's the easy, and most of the time those techs are so happy to be able to talk to somebody that's not calling about a problem. They'll talk your ear off, and they'll be really happy to be able to do an update on that. So that's something that you should be doing. If you want to be really aggressive about it, do it every 30 days. If you do it twice a year, maybe the same time you change the batteries in the fire, alarms in your house, that would be a great thing to be able to do from here, because it is provided by that internet provider. So you don't have direct control over them, but you can call them. They have made this because it's easy to install. They provided a default password on there. If the piece of equipment that you have gotten from them allows you to be able to change that default password, by goodness, change it. It should not be password. It should with a gobbledygook. It's a copy of that gobbledygook is sitting someplace. So change the default password on whatever it is that you have here, that Wi-Fi, that router. If you're lucky enough to be able to, think about getting a firewall, which is like the best thing to do from a business standpoint and from a work from home standpoint. But make sure that you change that password. Same goes with all of those other things in your home. The Nest thermometer, the Alexa, the camera, all of those things have a default password, and that means if somebody gets into your network or a piece of code gets in your network, first thing they're going to do is, oh, you got a Nest thermometer. I know the default password for that. I bet you we didn't change that, and that piece of code goes in there and starts doing something. So change the passwords, and remember to keep those passwords in a particular place. Don't reuse them. Put them in that vault or put them on that piece of paper. And then if you're working from a home computer, you're going to need to take the responsibility of securing that home computer. That means running updates, getting antivirus software on there, adding a DNS filter, and making, especially for work, one of the best things that you can do is separate the work machine from the entertainment machine. So, yes, I have I have several pieces of equipment in my house, but where I do my surfing is my silly little Samsung, tablet, because I could care less what happens to that thing, and that's perfectly placed for me to be able to do any kind of, home-based internet surfing. When I'm on my business computer, all I'm doing is going to business. You really have to be able to watch the other computers that are in the home as well. Those kids are going everywhere. If you've got a teenager and you don't have any filtering, God knows what kind of websites those boys are going to. And that stuff is just filled with the plague, and the plague is going to jump through here. So you're going to want to be able to start taking care of that. The best thing that you can do for that home machine that you're using or that work machine is put it on a different, it's called segment of the network. A lot of times now, the piece of equipment that you're getting from your internet provider allows for a guest Wi-Fi and a secure Wi-Fi. Put all of those people on guest. Yes, put your kids on guest. Put the Nest on guest. Alexa on guest. And only use that secure network. And that's pretty funny because Alexa's now talking to me in the background. Alexa, cancel. And so, yes, my Alexa is running on my guest network, not on my business network. Because remember, any piece of equipment that has a default password, isn't running current updates, very much has the plague running around on it, and you just don't want that getting into your work environment. So keep those default passwords, password change, anything that you have, keep it going and keep the updates going on there. So, kind of in summary, you've got to worry about those applications that are on your computer, even your antivirus software. If you're running Norton or WebRoot or, we love SentinelOne. SentinelOne is like next generation antivirus, and that's really what the world is now moving to. But you have to make sure that it is up to date and it's running. The first thing a virus does is go, whoop, I'm just going to disable the antivirus software. And it'll, start disabling all kinds of things. So these are typically, you have to worry about the software, you have to worry about the physical pieces of equipment, and then you have to be able to look at that equipment that you may not understand that's sitting between your home and that last mile provider, and being able to make sure that everything is updated. So they're your big four. Update, update, update. Every piece of equipment, change the default password, practice password hygiene. Change the passwords, make them strong, don't reuse them. Look into DNS filtering. And if you're here because you were invited by an IT advisor, just ask them to explain to you more and show you how you can add a DNS filter to your home, which is going to benefit not only the business work you're doing, but being able to keep all of that crap from being able to get into your home network. And then just verify that everything is up and working properly and that you've got those right kind of things being able to go. So those are the big four. for some reason, I forgot the other one on here. But there are more items. But I want to make sure that we leave time for some Q&A. I see some questions being able to come up into the panel. But please, if you're interested in being able to know the other things that need to be done in order to be able to really secure your home for business use, just reply to the email that's going to come out to you, and we will send you the rest of the story. So Tara, what do we got cooking on Q&A?
Great, awesome. So before I jump into the Q&A, I wanted to let you know, I posted the results so everybody who's participating can see, but some interesting things, great things. It sounds like around the whole password discussion, 53% of the people attending are changing their password every 2 to 6 months, which is great. And then the other question that I wanted to just share with you as you answer some of these questions, one of the whole questions was, do you know what DNS filtering is? And 60% of the people didn't. So I think this was great education. And so just keep that in mind and replying to some questions possibly. But one of the first questions we have is, how important is DNS filter if a customer has a good Barracuda firewall with DNS filtering turned on?
I would have to say that you are in pretty good shape. As long as you are updating that Barracuda firewall with the security items that are coming in. Barracuda is an extremely reputable company and very often a very cost-effective one. So I think you can feel really good that that aspect of your security stack, the layers, is in good shape.
Right. Awesome. We have another question. Guest Wi-Fi doesn't work with all devices. My Fire Sticks don't like it and have problems when I try to use it. I plan to move them to a different network.
So unfortunately, this is where we get into, the tougher things to be able to work about. So if the guest Wi-Fi doesn't work, then yes, you should have a separate network for that, and maybe even get a separate Wi-Fi unit, or for work purposes, run an Ethernet cable directly into your modem so that you're not able to get traffic that's moving between there. I would also say that you can turn network isolation on, and that means that your machine is invisible to the rest of the things that are in the home. Your Fire Stick does want to be able to communicate with other things. That female that will remain nameless wants to be able to talk with other devices that are there. So yes, put them on a separate network, or build a small network or a single place for your business information.
Great. So one other question is, so taking into consideration all the things you've talked about, when we start to transition back into kind of maybe a hybrid work environment, or going all the way back to the office, but if we're in that hybrid environment and maybe I'm working at home a couple days a week, and then I'm going to start going to a coffee shop when those open, and then also still going to my office, like, how should I apply what I learned today to, like, when I'm working in a coffee shop?
So let's talk about the coffee shop. So increasingly I divide all of this into 3 main segments. So you've got that first segment. If we go back to this diagram over here, let's see if I can do this. So this is that first segment. This is how you're connecting to the internet. And this is that part that you don't necessarily have control over. So now you're in the coffee shop. The coffee shop has got one of those. So what you need to do, and it's got one of those Wi-Fis, you have to assume that this is unsecure. So what you can do if you're working in that coffee shop is now add a secure VPN connection. There is a great one called WinScribe. WinScribe is used by a lot of the NSA professionals. It is free, and what you're doing is you're creating a secure tunnel between your laptop in that coffee shop through the Wi-Fi and out to a good server. So they're making sure that that traffic is encrypted from your machine all the way through those not so secure areas and a good server, and then being able to send you out to the internet. So it's the internet, it's your internet gateway, and then of course you want to be running all the right endpoint protection or protections on your machine.
And what about comparing that to like the use of a personal hotspot? What would you recommend with that if you have that?
Personal hotspots are absolutely great. If anybody goes into the airport, never connect to that Wi-Fi, because there's all kinds of people sitting there spinning up their own little Wi-Fis trying to attract you. If you need to do something in the airport, spin up that hotspot, or even in the coffee shop. If you do need to do anything that you may be concerned about, or there's a whole bunch of people around, your risk in the coffee shop is what's happening in that local network of that coffee shop and what's happening in those other people that are around you. They may look really nice, but trust me, you look at some of the wanted posters, hackers can look really good and you'd never think they were a hacker.
That's great. I think you've answered all the questions. The only other question that we have is just inquiring about recording. And as Linda touched on, at the conclusion of the webinar, you'll receive an email with a recording link, also the slide deck, and then link to contact to reach out to Linda or other CMIT owners in your area to help you with this whole process that Linda covered today. So I don't know if you have any other closing comments, but I really appreciate your presentation. It was very, very informative.
Good. I'm so glad, and thanks for the questions that came in as well. It's always good to be able to find out exactly what's going on. Product choice is always a big question that comes up. But I truly thank you for being able to spend time on this webinar, really investing in yourself and your education. And I want you, if there's any parting comment I have, it's look down, think right now for a couple minutes about what you heard, and at least take one thing and implement it, or be able to take this conversation out to somebody maybe in your family that isn't so computer literate, and also spread the word that these are the big basics. If you can do these basics, you're going to be walking around a whole lot safer.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda.